Thanks, Drew. Thanks, everybody. We are the Opportunity Project. So what's our opportunity with this pretty daunting set of tasks we have? And part of that is the surface area of solution making. Like if we actually included everyone on the design side and the action side, we could move much faster. We maybe could fix nearly everything. So this idea of collective genius. So I'm going to jam through a lot of images and ideas, and I'm going to start a little bit with some of the early days in Opportunity Project because some of that comes from that. So, are you working? Are we working? Oh, there we go. Okay, so part of the theory comes from some of these insights, which is getting humans who belong together to be working together instead of in silos. So this is just a screenshot from when President Obama was going to Boise, Idaho, and we wondered how many tech meetups are there in Boise, Idaho? And so we wouldn't know, like how many, but it turns out there were 15. And one of them, Girl Development, was meeting twice a week, co-coding. One of them had 800 people in it. Like, it was crazy. And this is just a pull from the Google developer groups all over the world that meet. You know, it's like the meetup tools. You know, and I call this the Wakanda Layer. Like, all these people are working together really rapidly in really interesting ways all over the world, and their neighbors don't know that. And so that's silly, right? And so some people are doing genius work with slower tools, and some people are working on other topics with really fast collaborative co-design tools. And so could we take those methods and bring them together? And so, oops, let me go backwards, sorry. So part of that was taking all this kind of activity, sprints and prototyping and activities of like bringing fellows from different groups together. How do we upgrade? How do we have campaigns? How do we get the innovators into the mix? And this idea of TQ. So tech quotient, tech skills, they really are for these purposes, not just only for the tech sector. We don't say, hey, there's lawyers over here, and then we have government over here, we have civil society, we have companies. We just have lawyers, and they work in all those things. So why wouldn't we have tech people, right? And that's been true since the beginning of our government. President Washington at the first State of the Union said, there's nothing that better deserves your patronage than science and literature. Cross-discipline, right? He also said knowledge in every country is the surest basis of public happiness. Fake news, knowledge. And in the beginning of the country, the idea of liberty, which sits on all our coins, was actually tied by our founders to the concept of science and technology. That Jefferson and Washington and Franklin, when they were designing the first coin, the first penny, the living penny, it says parent of science and industry. That freedom could be connected to capabilities around science and technology. And so our country has always had that, right? From the very beginning. President Washington started what became the Army Corps of Engineers, right? So President Kennedy, working closely with Jerry Wiesner, upgrading what was the amazing teams that were more like flight and other things into NASA for the space race. So what was our turn? Taking tech people from the tech sector, like lawyers, and have them flow in. So this is a group of people who came to serve their country, and blended in with other genius technical people who were already here, AAAS fellows, people from the NASA team, NIH, Department of Defense, all of that group, together with other people who were not using some of the methodologies that we were seeing at the Wakanda Layer, right, that we were seeing in the Boise group where the neighbors didn't know each other. And it looked like policy conversations on tech, it looked like upgrading websites for engagement and getting out of sort of that terrible government form into a really beautiful form. Like, we have Americans who make this, so where are they? Get them in the team, right? Get them, one or two of them, like a Surgeon General, in the government, so we purchase really well, and tons of amazing government contractors and teammates and lifting our industry through private sector, but not buying old stuff that's bad for our fellow citizens, but buying beautiful things very cheaply. And so it looked like extractive industries data, and then open source and sharing that with all kinds of countries, like Nigeria and others who have challenges here. It looked like an open call for a grand challenge around Ebola suit redesign urgently, because people were trying to treat folks in these suits, remember this? And it was 45 minutes and too hot, and people were getting sick from the suits. What were the challenges? So there was a day, a weekend, where people had all these different suits, trying them on, all different kinds of people, from wedding dress designers, youth, hazmat experts, doctors who'd been in the situation, talking through the problems, taking photos of what they came up with in their hackathon type situation, like sprint, like you guys are gonna do. And from that, the grand challenge went out with that baseline, and we got this incredible suit back that was now going through review. So the Opportunity Project comes from that ethos. It comes from that time where the census team noticed that certain data sets were flying off the shelf. Like every day, the US Geological Survey data sets fly off the shelves into our mapping apps, whether they're Google or Esri or Bing or whatever, right? And people are doing driving directions and layers on top. And could we have that happen for everybody else? Could it not just be for our very tech agencies, but the agencies that also could be tech too, like HUD and ED? So one of my favorites was the Redfin team. So the HUD team, what do you need, HUD? We need housing mobility, housing affordability, all these hard challenges, much harder than the classic stuff I was exposed to in Silicon Valley when I worked there. And so these are hard, complex challenges that need really cross-functional teams. And so Redfin, Zillow, Airbnb, some of the great housing-related innovators could come together with startups and say, what features might I launch in my platform, like Opportunity Score, that would be for all Americans, not just wealthier Americans, and we could help people with jobs and other things. Similarly, Department of Education, this was an internal team that launched a set of open source set based on some APIs to help young people know more about when they're going to college, buyer beware information. So this was the college scorecard. Some of the Presidential Innovation Fellows went on a road rally around this data set. This is a data set that was showing aggregated income data. And so they were able to hack the pay gap. We're always talking about the pay gap. And we're always saying that if we could fix the pay gap, it would add trillions of dollars, it would do this, it would do that, it would be equal. And yet, why aren't we applying apps and data science and innovation to that? And that's what they did, and they came up with extraordinary apps. Everything from simple consciousness raising, like change your race or gender and change the price on the screen, to VR opportunities to help managers make less pay gap, help employees create less problems for themselves, understand your specific pay gap. So these things I'm talking about are happening all around, and part of what the Pay Gap team and others were using is tapping in to that same thing that I started with in Boise and around the world, the sort of civic hacking community and the tech communities that are already out there. So Code for America and others and the brigades and people are really getting this done at a local level and also at a global level, other countries. We've seen Mexico, Singapore, Kenya, Indonesia, France, Canada, like all of the teams. Estonia is the furthest ahead. They have the most digital country, and they blended in their Skype and other teams, and they started to work together just like Washington did in the day. This is not a new idea. I say President Lincoln, he got the Pony Express, and he upgraded to the Telegraph, and we can too. So it's not a new idea, right? So whether it was the White House hackathon for foster care, whether it was green energy, green button, also blue button, that was for health data. This is Grace, so Denise, back there. So Denise started the Police Data Initiative with Clarence and some others, Presidential Innovation Fellows, and they noticed that there were data sets being released by different cities, use of force data, officer-involved shootings, justice data. And they noticed that certain cities were acting, and so this is Grace, who's in 10th grade. She's teaching the police chief here how to code, and they're bringing New Orleans into this idea. So think of all the data sets in all the cities and how you could workshop people to get moving, start somewhere. And then eventually all of these cities started to work together. Apprentice journey mastery, seniors teach the freshmen. Find what's already working, scout and scale, and then help spread the word. Same idea with computer science for all. We found some places we're teaching coding to all our kids. We all learn freshman biology. Not all of us are biologists. But it's really useful to know that information, just like every kid in our country should know how to code, they should know computational thinking and computer science, and that was happening. There is as many open STEM jobs as people in prison. And when we teach tech in prison, people don't come back. The recidivism drops to like 7% or less, rather than 70. People get skills. We can find these workforces. So one of the things we did was community organizing innovation. So we brought the people who had built all of the tech meetups from these cities together, and also people who do genius bridging work. Well, I'll just point out one rec to tech. If you go up to Baltimore, there's a rec center that has a tech center. And the tech center, you got Mega and Nano. Mega's high school, Nano little kids. And they're just doing 3D printing and advanced manufacturing, but it's play, and it's fun, and then they move into jobs in Baltimore. So this idea of tech hire, we noticed that there were employers hiring from the brand new code boot camps. We know about coding boot camps now, but at the time, they were just starting to emerge. And we saw that St. Louis and Louisville and otherwise had these new kinds of training, months, not years. We saw that in Louisville, there were municipal leaders who were saying, Code Louisville, trying to get this organized. And then again, the techies were in town. So it was really the not government program of tech hire to just say y'all should meet each other. And so we started building, and so eventually it got from 5 cities who were already doing it, who shared with 10 cities, who shared to 20, and pretty soon we had 40 and 70 cities. And then we found a dusty budget. Department of Labor had $150 million for retraining Americans. And we said, hey, could these 70 cities use this and apply for that? Yes, of course. And all money started to flow. Favorite was Albuquerque. Albuquerque was retraining veterans, aging out foster care kids, single parents, people coming out of prison, people with disabilities, all to become part of the tech workforce, which also, by the way, makes the tech workforce better. Because the more diverse your team, the better your products, the better your solutions. Data Science Cabinet. It was really interesting, basically taking everyone from like the Department of Labor, Department of Defense, all the different agencies, pull them together and realize that NASA, National Institute of Health, Department of Energy, genius data scientists, right? That they could coach and help the State Department and others, and very quickly they came up with a rubric like school. And they just said, what is it like to be great at this? What's it like to be not so good? And some of the agencies looked at this like, oh my God, I'm not even on this page. And then you could have community of practice and teammates to work together with. Okay, so that was what was happening. Now today, we face extraordinary data set bias. We're right now writing algorithms that will just accelerate some people and decelerate others. And so we gotta start to wake up and do things about it, and we have to use the incredible data sets that Chris was just talking about for our planet to better see and share and storytell about them. This data set I like to pull because over here, the small one, the blue is, this is media. Blue is men's lines, white is women's, or red is women's lines. So in children's TV, we teach our kids that men speak and women speak a little. And then when we grow up, this is 2,000 movies. Men speak a lot and women barely speak. We don't want that world. We want to hear the men and we want to stretch down and hear the women too. So how do we get in and work with data sets like this? This is one from Business Insider looking at how Congress used to vote together. The gray is when they're voting across. Bipartisan collaboration. And then as we get into cable news and the internet, we start to completely divide out into media silos. So what can we do to share this back and figure out how to solve this very complicated problem? Kathy O'Neill, Weapons of Mass Destruction, I encourage you to listen to her TED Talk. Just genius realization of what is happening with these biased data sets and sort of black box algorithms that nobody's monitoring. You know, Joy Buolamwini, the phone in your pocket is racist. When you take a photo of somebody with lighter skin, don't have to adjust the flash. Darker skin, have to adjust the flash. That's wrong. And it existed with Kodak and Kodachrome, and it needs to go away. And so we have an imbalance in our NIST data sets around racial facial recognition. So if for gender, for age, and for race, we need to fix that. You know, if you haven't seen The Big Nine, I encourage you at a minimum read the opening chapter because it's really encouraging about it. All of us belong in the AI conversation, all of us. It's not just the wizards of tech, it's all of us. So I'm from Buffalo. Tesla used Niagara Falls to light our city. We're proud of that. We also came with a legacy then of all the destructive things, as Chris was talking about, that we've built with our human footprint, including I grew up during the Love Canal Superfund crisis. So all the PCBs and other things entering into our water. So this is Jimmy Carter's solar panels that he was putting on the White House when we were kids. We went in the solar car race. I got inspired by hard problems to become a technical person. And so what I'm excited about is Pepco today has figured out the policy to put green solar panels on all of our roofs here in DC, and they're offering great incentives using fines that are laid on them when they don't get enough green energy in the region. So there's clever things we can do with tech, policy, and community organizing. We need to, by the way, in this one, get more women on the roofs. I've noticed it's all men, only in the install. I work with the Havasupai tribe with my colleague Susan Osler. They are fighting uranium mining above our Grand Canyon, and bipartisanly we agree with not having uranium mining destroying our Grand Canyon. So we gotta get in and have the will, in general, as Chris is looking across, and also, as you were saying, in the specific, in each place we love, and do something about it. We wanted a crazy tech jobs tour. My friend Leanne Pittsburgh came up with this. So how about a road rally for getting everybody into the inclusive future of work? This is Cleveland, speed mentoring. This is Oakland, 2,000 people in Silicon Valley showed up to try to figure out how to get out into tech in Oakland. And you can do apprentice journey mastery like the guilds of old, and bring them in. We found centers. This is Memphis. Code Crew bridges the 45,000 young people out of school and out of work into the tech sector in Memphis, which has FedEx, AutoZone, and others. But they don't know how to get the groups together, so let's do some hustle, like we've done in the past. George Washington Carver did the ag extension. We can do tech extension. In the Mississippi Delta, above the BTG grocery store, is an amazing coding boot camp. This is a tiny town. And they take all the kids in their town who don't go to college, and they go to the boot camp. And a year later, they flow them into the Mississippi tech sector. This is happening now in the 4th year. Dozens of kids are now in the tech sector, and they don't have to compete with Silicon Valley, because these kids want to live in Mississippi. That's where they're from. This is a training center in that container box. It's a STEM boot camp that lives in your playground, and you do dance and UAVs and coding. This is Code Crew's high school version. They also lift historic figures. Appalachia, tiny town, Pikeville, Kentucky. These guys offer 12 jobs in a new tech startup. 800 people applied. And now they're reshoring jobs to America into Appalachia. They taught themselves to code, and now they do all kinds of things up there. This is Idaho. This is Boomerangers. So wherever you're from, think where you're from. If you went home right now and opened up a tech center, this is the Innovation Collective in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. Not only did they open this in their town, but they also went on a road rally across Idaho. They did 57 events, 12 cities, 3 days, and they did 1 hour burst, learn to code, get a Sphero, get an iPad, start doing this stuff, learn Swift. And 700 people signed up to learn to code in Idaho, like a book club. That's happening, and that's 2 years ago. This is this idea, rebuild our downtowns so that the buildings can come live again with makerspaces, and the same ideas as the libraries. People have done this before. It's the McClure engineering team doing placemaking. And with the Sustainable Development Goals of the UN, we got a big agenda. So what we did is we worked with the UN to put up a webpage saying who's already fixing this stuff. First year we got 800 people. People flying drones to plant a billion trees a year. People teaching law in prison. This is the floating fab lab. So in the Amazon, should we cut down the trees, or should we have the indigenous genius communities have advanced manufacturing bio capabilities so that they can invent and design with us? And that's really happening. There's a maker movement, but we can include everyone in it and not bias it. And so this is the ones from the last year. We got 1,400 submissions from 141 countries in 3 weeks. Collective genius. Ask who's already fixing. This is Standing Around Compineers. These are genius innovators at MIT. Through the MIT Solve program, we teamed with them to ask who's already working on water and housing and community innovations. And we found Henry Redcliffe and Rose, solar, agriculture, new kinds of design for urban design. So this is the idea. 3 things. 1, take the practices of our day and take everybody. Everybody's good at writing and storytelling and tech and data and law and communications and policy and engineering and science and invention, all the tools. And think about what studio can we get in, or who can we find who's already building it? How do we get moving? How do we do a lot more y'all should meet each other? Right? Like so many people, right? We call Scout Scale. Who's already fixed this? What are you doing? Oh, that's like Tech Hire. Oh my God, St. Louis, Louisville, you're already doing that? Okay, cities, do you want to share? And then the last one is, how do we better share what's already working together, blended with the problems, so more people can play and more people can copy and adapt and iterate? Those are the plays. The second thing I would argue is that the young people involved in all of the conversations will help us. How about we work on our hometown for our homework? It makes school way less boring. So Gene Holm, who did Data.gov with all of us, UCLA data science faculty, NASA, and now working for Mayor Garcetti in LA, has the Data Science Federation, homage to Star Trek. And so she gets her city teams to actually pose problems. And then she goes over to her students and she says, you guys have a homework assignment for capstone or project, 6-week project. Remember how the MBA kids call and they say, I have to do a real world project. Can I work in your company? Same idea, only data science. And so the kids now do city projects in LA, from UCLA, USC, community colleges across Southern California joining, so we can spread that and pull the kids in. This is the chief science officers. They're from Arizona. So imagine any of us as tech people getting elected by our peers, not to treasurer, not to class president, student council, but chief science officer. There are now 700 in America. Michigan, Oregon, and Arizona, and let's see, New Jersey joining, Western New York, Kuwait, and Mexico. We can have everybody have these skills. This is the DQ Institute that's working on tech and innovation for everybody, that everyone would be empowered, like freshman biology with these, and we can team together. And then the last thing I would add is the skew in what we understand about who actually did everything is really biasing us. And the lack of knowing who was always badass, which is everybody, and also that they worked on all topics. Like when we started working on the Opportunity Project, people thought, oh, of course, we'll work on like health and transportation and energy and defense and security. And we said, yeah, and we'll work on foster care and school lunch program and poverty and WIC, because people always have. Like, this is Ada Lovelace, she has cool hair. Ada invented computer science. When she wrote her paper, that's the same time Darwin wrote his paper. Darwin wrote about our past. Where did we come from? Ada wrote about our future. I wish to bequeath to the generations a calculus of the nervous system. And she disagreed with Turing. Turing later cites her work. She doesn't want to imitate anything. She wants us to be collaborating with technology. Her vision for AI is still even ahead of us. A calculus of the nervous system, to me, speaks of quantum, not binary. So it's really interesting to think about her. Ida B. Wells, one of the greatest American data scientists in the history of our country, uses data science of the time to look at what's going on. Two of her friends are in the People grocery store in Memphis. They're dragged from their home and executed. So she looks at lynching data and tells the real story in the Red Record. That data set that we need to know about how we're treating each other, and she changed the country. Jane Addams. How many people have heard of her? Okay. She won the Nobel Peace Prize for inventing social work. And her colleague, Ellen Starr, who co-founded this with her, always talked about not liking the way the industrialists were approaching and feeling like we needed to get back to the guilds of old, apprentice, journey, mastery, and welcome everyone into the future, which can be the inclusive future of work and solutions, and they used a lot of data. This is industrial Chicago data on livelihoods and where people came from and all of that. The beautiful, smart, wise city that we could have. Ellen Swallow Richards. She started testing the water. We're talking about toxic water and dead zones. She started testing the water and created what became sort of the science of normal life. What do we eat? What's around us? What's in our environment? So I'll just end with this image of Kimura and Olivia. Olivia's making this great game. Kimura's made this app. She's listening to the room to see what kind of domestic violence might be happening, and she'll ask you if you need help. Do you need the police? What do you need? Why wouldn't that be the most amazing feature to try to figure out with Alexa and Siri and really work the privacy issues at the proper level that they should be? You can only do that with a deeply cross-functional team because it's such a hard problem. So every day, every year, during the school year, we feed 22 million children free and reduced lunch. And in the summer, we can only get to 6 million of them, and they're hungry. So the Opportunity Project is about the data sets in the Department of Agriculture and the data sets in the Department of Health and Human Services, especially HS, because we're all expected in H, but not HS. And getting in there, right? And figuring out that big data problem with the churches and with the Boys and Girls Club and with everybody we can find in town, because that's a much harder data set problem than self-driving cars, I bet. And we figured out the self-driving cars, so why can't we actually get the humans who worked on that kind of stuff together with the humans who are experts on food and community organizing and get the smart, wise city and solve the school lunch program? And how about this year? And we can use the Opportunity Project because that's what it's all about. So thank all of you. I thank the team at Census. Census, there's nothing bigger data than Census. And there's nothing with more money than the US government. There is nothing in the world with more money, right? So what are we doing? So why don't we just fix it, right? So start now. Start with things like prototypes and especially scouting and scaling, getting in the studio. And so as part of that, just, all the genius, there were 4 women in space together, including 2 women of color. Like, let's see everybody, how badass we've always been, and let's fix this stuff. So thank you so much. I'm looking forward to see what people come up with today and on into the future. Thanks, you guys.